Marshall in the middle.
I'm here with Berto. Is it Lainez? Say your last name for me.
Sure, it's Lainez.
Lainez.
It's been Americanized a little bit, but I think my sisters still pronounce it Lainez. But
Lainez.
Lainez, yeah,
Okay.
like Martinez,
Yeah. So I was telling you earlier. So this is kind of So Marshall in the Middle came out of one of my buddies, Rob Maggot. His wife called me and she goes, "Rob's sick, man. Something's not right. He can't remember anything. We're in the hospital. They say he might have a brain tumor. He can't remember what he ate yesterday, this kind of stuff." So I'm thinking, oh my God, it's I don't know. It just hit me. And so I called him up and tried to get all the story. He was still in the damn hospital. I was trying to get all the stories told while he could still remember them. Because I don't know, just reminisce one more time,
Yeah.
And so that started, what we're doing now. There's over 200 interviews that we've done, and it's supported by donations. Here's our latest, donor status. There's Aganaga there, part of the master rated donors. If you'd like to be a part of the master rated donor program, let me know. I'll let you know. But there's our basic donors over here, our senior donors. And then, of course, recently, Penny A. Cox Esquire, attorney at law, for all your attorney needs. If the popo's chasing you, call Penny. She's been helping. She pays the internet there's a hosting fee, and that's fairly significant. So she helps out with that. And again, what we're trying to do is just to get our stories told before we're too old or too sick to tell them. And then you get a little coin with a serial number on it. I chose 0034 for my 3rd of the 4th ADA in the 82nd. Probably, my favorite unit. And then a titanium thumb drive. So if the Russians come or something, it'll survive. and believe it or not, this box was made in Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but we bought it off of Etsy. We designed it and bought it off of Etsy. But it's just an idea to have something for your grandkids to remember, granddad by your story. What would you give for your ancestors' stories in their own words if you had a video of them telling, about their, at some level, it's an adventure, right? What you've been on, what your life has been. It's been some type of quest that I think at some level, and a lot of it happens about the time you start to have grandkids and start to retire. You start to look back on things and go, okay, and you get a sense of accomplishment, But this is really, Berto, a time for us to tell our stories before we're too old or too sick to tell them, because we're just one doctor visit away from stage 4 cancer, and you just never know. You just never know. So, we recently met. I know you're in the 82nd Airborne Division. I thank you for your service. I know that you're it says right there, you're a veteran, a husband, and a father. I think that's amazing. Tell me a little bit more about yourself, just like introduce yourself to me and everybody else out there that's going to watch this one day.
Sure. Yeah, so my name's Roberto Lainez, and I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm very proud of the 3 institutions that definitely changed my life. The first one was I went to private boarding school. It's the last all-boy boarding school or not the last, but one of the last all-boy boarding schools in the United States. It's called Woodbury Forest School. And then went to college. That obviously defined me, and I met some great folks there, to include my roommate, Jasper, who we both enlisted in the Army after a 6-hour ordeal with the recruiter. And then, but that was at Bucknell University in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. And then, of course, the biggest impact in my life was joining the military. My first duty station was the 82nd Airborne Division. I was there for 6 years, and Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, and that's part of the 3rd Brigade Combat Team. And then I also spent 3 years as a Ranger instructor down at Fort Benning, Georgia. Went to OCS, got assigned to various organizations and units over a 9-year span as a signal officer. And then the last 6 years I was in the military, I was a contracting officer and contract specialist. One of the unique aspects of that was when I was deployed, we did a lot of host nation negotiations. So I spent a lot of time in smoky rooms with key officials, the Kurds in northern Iraq, and we were also negotiating some things with our special operations guys in Syria. So very hands-on, very incredible experiences. But all that culminated in 24 years of service. I eventually retired in 2024, and I got to retire here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Great community. Everywhere you go, you're going to run into veterans or someone who's either a defense contractor or just great Americans who support us. So it's been great, and I'm looking forward to sharing more details with you.
So going to an all boys school, boarding school. I mean, what? Tell me. I don't. Tell me about that. Tell me how that works.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll tell you was I had wonderful teachers and a wonderful principal when I was in middle school. I went to Francis Hammond Junior High School in Alexandria, Virginia. When I was there, I always did well, but the situation was a little bleak sometimes, financially, or just growing up in the neighborhood that I did. Lots of different challenges, whether it was petty crime, drug dealing, all these things that happen in inner city areas, and I was able to overcome those things and just always put my head in the books and do well. My teachers knew I had potential, and just by chance, one of my teachers met someone who was associated with the school. Recently, I actually had someone reach out to me who knew me, but I didn't know them. But he told me how his wife, who had recently passed away, but she was instrumental in helping me get to Woodbury Forest School. The bottom line, I was told about the opportunity. One of my good friends, he was just like, "Man, you're not going to go. Nobody ever leaves the neighborhood," kind of deal. And that kind of motivated me. It was just like, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going. And I was 13 years old. To leave your family and all your friends, at that age, that's a pretty significant decision to make. Who wants to leave their friends at that age, right? But it was an incredible opportunity. I remember just looking through the brochure and just being like, wow, look at this guy. He's studying on a nice bed, and he's got a dresser, and he's got a desk with a laptop on it. I was like, I want to be able to do that, So we took a pretty neat drive down from Alexandria, Virginia, down 95 to Orange, Virginia, which is the closest town there. And beautiful scenery, incredible. You'll drive past Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville if you're a history buff and you like the Civil War. Well, many battles were right around where I went to school, but it was a beautiful area. You drive in, it's kind of like Dead Poets Society, winding road, and then on the hill you see all the schools or all the school buildings. The fact that it was an all-boys school never bothered me, or I didn't even play into the equation. I just saw opportunities to, have a fun time with the guys, have a great camaraderie. We all grew up together. I'm still friends with most of my classmates, either on Facebook or just in general, even closer. But it definitely was a very impactful time in my life. And when I got there, I will tell you, I was a little behind when I got there in terms of academics. I remember the first year, it was just grammar. ninth grade grammar, and they dug it into you. It was just, but in the end, it was very challenging and academically, and I'm better off for it now. I consider myself a decent writer, but we used to have to write, a 5-page essay every Monday, for 4 years. That you knew at minimum that's what you had to write over the weekend for homework for English class. And I ended up, at points there were some folks that were like, well, this course load looks a little more difficult. You may not be able to do well, and that always felt like the challenge, right? When someone tells you can't do something, you want to overcome it and prove them wrong. So by the end, I had great grades. It was over a 4.0. I was able to play 3 sports there. I played football, I wrestled, and I also played lacrosse and did some performing arts. Actually, my senior year, I was in West Side Story, and that was a pretty significant time in our school too, because several athletes were also involved in it. We had like our star football running back, so that was a big deal. Most people didn't do the performing arts, but we kind of broke the mold there, and people were athletes. They were doing performing arts, and it just let you, I think, in that environment, just kind of like in the military, when you're in an all-guy unit, you just kind of, you drop the drama, and it's just like, hey, we're just going to do ourselves, and no judgment. And it was a wonderful opportunity to grow and to learn, and then just kind of be with the guys, kind of deal.
Did that, as you look back on that, was that a stable time compared to what you had been a part of before, or was that a tumultuous time?
No, I would definitely say it was a stable time. And the only reason I say that, everyone was, into the books. Everybody was into athletics. There wasn't, we lived there. So, it was a boarding school. So you got to get to know your teachers very well. Some of the administrators, it was just a very structured learning environment. I guess that's the best way. And we had leadership roles similar to like the military. I was a prefect. So one of the things that's very distinct about the school I went to, the honor system, you didn't lie, cheat, or steal. You could leave things everywhere and nobody would ever touch them. You leave your books and take off, go play football or go whatever, and then come back like way later at night and your stuff would be there. But it was a self-run kind of governing system where we had senior prefects. Each dorm had a prefect in charge of it. But unfortunately, there were times that we had to convene and for like a violation. It was very rare, but when it did occur, you can imagine like the movie. I don't know if you've ever seen 12 Angry Men. It's an old movie, but it's about a jury trying to decide some guy's fate, and everyone has their agenda. Some people want to get out of there quickly or whatever, but it was student run. So here you are, a senior in high school, having to decide another student's fate, if they had been caught in lying, cheating or stealing. And generally, you would be kicked out of school for those infractions. So it was a very kind of, I guess, character building, values-based school, which was good. And that's one of the things that kind of you just always kind of hold to your heart. And I'll tell you, my high school, I have a bigger connection to my high school. I actually still wear my high school ring because it means a lot to me, And that was, I'd say, next to the Army, that was the most influential institution. Of course, I went to college and I met some great folks at Bucknell, but ironically enough, I went to Bucknell because there were so many friends of mine going there from Woodbury. So it was just an easy decision to, hey, I've got great friends I just spent the last 4 years of my life with, and we're all going to spend the next 4 in college also,
So you talked earlier when the last interview, we talked about you having to come up with English as a second language, right? Mm-hmm. Tell me about your younger history. What was it like being an immigrant? Tell me about your family history. I know that there was some tragedy in the past.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So in terms of the family history, we emigrated from El Salvador, my mother and I, and I still remember that voyage. I mean, I'm talking about literally, it's like the picture you see in the movies. It's like we're walking through the desert in Mexico, and we actually got lost for a while there. And the only thing that saved us, I mean, I had cacti needles all over me. There was no water. We were like in dire straits, and I think this old lady saw us. We had to be somewhere in like the Sonoran Desert, and she used an old army tactic. She got a mirror and just started signaling us, and with the reflections, and we finally saw her. And then that night she fed us and like kind of took care of us and reoriented us. And then we eventually, crossed the border into the United States. And once we got to the United States, we sought asylum because my father had been killed and there was a civil war going on in El Salvador. It was dire straits then. And luckily, and, I think a lot of people forget this period in history, but, President Reagan, he actually approved a period of asylum. And, I to this day, President Reagan, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, to me, those are my three top presidents, because there are some great things that they did. And, at times they had to deal with extreme situations. And you see that executive, almost kind of forward thinking kind of knowledge or acknowledgement of the things that were occurring. So that's how we ended up getting asylum. And then I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. But, as you can imagine, multi-generational house, all of my dad's, well, not all of them, but most of my dad's sisters live with us. Close quarters, they all had kids. And then it was me and my two sisters eventually. But to this day, my sister actually still lives in that house. And, I'm just proud that, she has that place. It's kind of like a center of gravity, so to speak. Whenever I go to the DC area, that's where we go. My sister that still lives in the region also, she's always over there. So it's kind of a family, kind of like a family, I guess, center of gravity, and brings everyone there. But I went to school where I grew up. It was a predominantly a Black neighborhood. And that was a tumultuous period for for Alexandria, Virginia. You mentioned English as a second language, but at that time there weren't programs like that. It was just all of a sudden people were just discovering, like, what is this place called El Salvador, and why are all these little kids here, and who are these new people in our neighborhood, that kind of deal, as you can imagine. And luckily the community there wasn't xenophobic. They were very open to us, and if anything, it was more curiosity. There were some resources that were lacking, like in the school systems. I just don't think the schools were prepared for an influx of kids like that. And I've seen that even happen in my military career, when down at Fort Gordon, Georgia, when the Signal Center transformed to the Cyber Center. The surrounding counties just had no idea of how many extra military kids were going to show. We had military kids who didn't even have a desk. They were just standing up in class. So I've seen it happen in the community as an adult, where, an influx of kids or just a change in the demographics can impact school systems. So, so that being said, I quickly caught on to the language, more because I was younger. It's easier, our brains are a little more elastic, and you can learn things. But, I grew up, basically emulating the lifestyle and the things I saw, the good things I saw in our neighborhood, and, learned the language quickly. And then it was odd because it wasn't until I went to middle school that was the first time I ever encountered like an ESL class. And I wasn't ever in any ESL class. I just picked up on the language pretty quickly. But then I saw almost like a second wave of kids who were experiencing the same thing I did, but if not from El Salvador, from other countries in Central and South America, and even globally. We had a lot of different like low conflict wars that were impacting people and creating refugees all over the world.
So you said you remembered that quest that you and your mom went on, right? Was she Was she an adventurer or was she foolish? What I mean, tell me about this. How do you like end up wandering in the desert? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I would describe my mom as a survivor and a fighter. Um, she you know when she had me, she was young. She was like 18 years old, and then to have the dad of your kid just disappear, during the Civil War. That was a lot of the I guess kind of the fears of most families back then in the Civil War. People just disappeared. There were I think about 89,000 people who disappeared in El Salvador during those 12 years of the Civil War. So, and that happened to my dad early on, before it became a big deal, before like human rights organizations got involved and NGOs, and, before the world just kind of started focusing on El Salvador. She lived it. She had a significant loss immediately. And then she came to the U.S. And worked hard, saved her money, and then came back. So one thing I didn't get into or dive into was, I speak about the center of gravity in Alexandria, Virginia, for our family with our house, but the center of gravity in El Salvador was our family's home. We had kind of I called it almost like a courtyard. There were 3 homes, and there was like the center, and but it was all my uncles and aunts and my cousins. For the first 4 years of my life, that's where I lived. I lived with my cousins while my mom was in the United States working, and finally she came back and got me. So we were basically just war refugees leaving because the war continued on, and it wasn't safe, and recently I just came back from El Salvador, and I got to reconnect with all those cousins I grew up with. I was some little kid, that they all just played around and kind of took care of. But, I think my cousin Pili, of the youngest one, she was maybe like 13 years old when I was born. So, I got to reconnect with her, and then all her other brothers were just a little older than her, but, or younger, actually, some of them. But, the bottom line is, I would characterize my mom as a scrapper, a hard worker. She just tried to overcome the situations. She was always, values based. She, very religious, prayed to God, just trusted in Him, and worked hard, and just kind of, tried to make the best of what the situations were. I I remember my mom, she passed away in 2014. And I remember speaking at the funeral and just kind of doing the eulogy there. But I just always remember just the love and the opportunities that she was willing to give us. She would do anything for us to be able to have an opportunity, whether it was going to like a summer camp with the church. She'd work extra shifts or whatever to, make the ends meet, or even, it's got to be a tough decision to leave your kid for 4 years, come back and get him. And then less than a decade later, he's telling you, hey, I'm leaving. I want to go to this boarding school, and to agree to that, that's got to be a tough choice there. And, so I'm just very proud of her, and, we miss her dearly, but, she had, my 2 sisters and my little brother, Raymond. And, she left a legacy on her own as well.
Amen. 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 So, what do you remember of being a war refugee? Did that affect you? How did your dad not being around and knowing he was, did you know he was just missing, or did you have any idea what was happening? What does little Berto think? When he's 6 and 7 years old in America?
Yeah, no. So that's a little bit of I don't want to. So I guess the best way to describe it is, I don't think it was openly talked about. Obviously, when I was up to 4 years old, I didn't know any better. I just, I thought I was surrounded with all my cousins, and my grandmother was responsible for me, and so it wasn't like I realized that. To be honest with you, I can't remember exactly when I first discovered that, the history of what happened to my dad. Um, for sure, by the time I was 12, I knew, because I remember meeting my paternal grandparents for the first time. We went back to El Salvador to visit, and I had a pretty impactful meeting with my grandparents. By then I knew that I had, my stepdad was my stepdad, but I didn't know the history too much about my dad until that age. Um, the only picture I have of my biological dad was given to me by my grandmother and my grandfather, and I only saw them one time. As you can imagine, pretty emotional for everyone. The moment they set eyes on me, they just started crying, because they kept commenting how I looked like my dad, and it was pretty impactful for my grandmother to just I guess see her grandkid come in there and walk in the door, and lots of tears, lots of hugs. I remember that experience pretty well. And unfortunately, I don't recall ever seeing them again. But after that visit, every now and then I'd get a letter from them. And, when you're younger, you don't realize the value of that until you're older. And, they did care about me. It wasn't that they didn't. It was just, I mean, I always try to tell my kids, imagine, we love living in the United States. I'm an American, they're American. And I'm like, imagine what it would take for us to leave the United States of America, like the situation it would have to be for us just to flee, to go to another country and start our lives over, and then to leave all the people behind that you love and you care about, and the culture and everything. And that's what basically my mom did, and I think most people wouldn't want to leave their country. Most people would love to stay where they're at, because it makes everything more difficult. You have to learn the language. If you were a professional now, you may be pumping gas or flipping burgers. It just brings about a lot of challenges. But the one thing I can tell you, just from the being a war refugee and seeing all the different families that were in similar situations, whether it was at church or even at our house, like my dad, our house was always open. Like, it wasn't rare for my dad to be like, "Hey, you gotta empty out your room, brother." And I was like, "All right." And I knew what that meant. That meant a new family had come to America, and they were just trying to help them. Usually they met them through church, and it was just like, "Hey, if anyone has any space, these guys are trying to get on their feet." Well, that may seem like a detriment, or like, "Oh, that sucks," but it was actually a blessing, because when my mom and my dad died, people came out of the woodwork. People flew in from like Texas, from California, from all over the country, and just said, "Hey, when we first got to the United States, your family was the first people we met, and they gave us a place to lay our heads down, stabilize. We got a job. We were able to save money, and then we left your home. And then guess what? Here comes the next family coming in." So that's what it was like, kind of growing up as a refugee. It was an open house, mostly through faith, and just through just trying to be good people, just helping each other, because we all knew everyone lost something. Just imagine, God forbid, and we're very lucky. We have a great defense, or Department of Defense. We have great soldiers and service members, but I can't imagine what it would take for a diaspora of Americans to leave the United States, and whatever that would be, then you have to go somewhere else and just kind of learn the language, because you don't know where those doors may open, because there's always a lot of politics involved. When I saw that actually even with Iraqi refugees. You'd be surprised which countries opened their doors and which ones didn't. And I'll let you do the research on that one. But I already know the answer. When it comes to the United States, we kind of started the war, but we refused to let anybody come in. So it's like, so you never know where you'll end up. But that's always the reminder I give my kids. It's like, most people do not want to leave their country. They want to live in a stable society. They want to, see their prosperity happen. And but that's what happened to us. We just lost a lot of opportunities, lost a lot of connections, came here, made the best of it, contributed, and And I always remind my kids that it's like, always open your heart and your mind to folks. I recently was working with Catholic Charities with their immigration attorneys, and it actually surprised me. In my mind, I was thinking I was going to see one demographic, and when I was there, of the 50 families that we helped, I think 40 of them were Ukrainian. Actually, now that you mentioned about the box, so we helped over 40 Ukrainian families apply for asylum here. And because of that, because of my experiences, I just felt a need to go do something to help people who were fleeing wars. I've seen war up close. I've seen what it can do. I've seen, the strategic objectives, which, are usually idealistic, but then there's mistakes that always happen. There's things that get impacted and people have to flee. So, yeah.
So tell me about that. Like, tell me about your war experience, right? Tell me that time where, you realized you had to defend yourself, or you ducked down because you realized somebody was assaulting you, or you had to. I don't know what your story is. Tell me about that.
In terms of the Salvadoran Civil War, or you're talking about just the global war on terror?
Anything, whatever. Okay. Tell me about the time where you were feared for your life, where you had to, I don't know, shoot somebody. You had to fire the mortar round, or I don't know what.
Sure. Yeah. In a recent conversation, I was telling one of our the deputy director of the Fort Carson contracting office. We were just having a meeting here, and I told her, she just kind of asked me, what's it like to deploy all the time? And because she has never been in the military. But I told her, it's an odd thing. You train for combat when you're young and fired up. You kind of hope for it to happen. There's a lot of value that people kind of place on combat patches or combat stripes, and that's what I call it the dog sniffing, the butt sniffing competition. People walk in, start checking out your uniform. What's this guy got? Oh, he's never deployed. And people kind of unfortunately people value those things in a negative way, I think, sometimes, because people have value, whether sometimes it's just pure chance whether you deploy or not, who's next on the rotation, or if contingencies rise or a crisis comes up. But the one thing I did tell her was, like, one thing, it's not normal to fear for your life every time you leave your house, and that's what it was like when, at least when we were in Afghanistan and Iraq, the times that I've been there. And yeah, there's been times, we did have to shoot our weapons to defend ourselves. I remember one time I was in the shower, I had my weapon with me. All of a sudden, the base, the front entrance, they started shooting at a vehicle that was coming in. So we're all thinking it's a vehicle-borne IED that's inbound. And literally guys in like their PT uniform, it was a mix of everything. Guys who were, had all their gear on with helmets. There was guys running who were just coming out of the gym, and, we all started running towards the fence to make sure, nobody busted through. I just ran. I just remember having the muddiest feet, but still having a hard time getting up to the Husco, and finally, getting in a position where I could observe things. But, it's just, there's so many different times, you're just, when you get hit with IEDs while you're, traversing the terrain, luckily, I count myself lucky. I never got hit by an IED, but people in my platoon did, or in another squad. You just have, when you're crossing that bridge, it was just like you hold your breath every time, because at least in Iraq, they always put the IEDs right by the bridges as you're traversing them, and or any little thing of trash, many times, you're afraid for your life, and I think there's a lot of things that you see too that kind of just, kind of bring you to reality. It's like in the previous interview, I discussed that Chinook crash, but I left out some details there. But I just remember arriving there and seeing a teddy bear full of blood, and it was just like, wow, and the backstory there was these guys were coming back from R&R when you rotated in and out of the country, or you went somewhere, kind of R&R for us in the infantry was like, hey, great, you get to go to Baghdad International Airport for 2 days and not do anything, Whereas later in the wars, you got to go home if you were depending where you were, or you went somewhere else where you weren't in a combat zone. But so it was just, I think one of the things when you deal with like war traumas is that you find that your nervous system's always on. You're always alert. You're always worried that something's going to happen. You're always worried that you come around the corner, you don't know what's there, kind of deal. And that kind of that nervous system being always alert is what I just remember and recall. Just and there were a lot of, and sometimes you don't even have to be involved in direct action or direct engagements. Just coming back. And I remember one time we came back, and I think our tent had got hit while we were out on a mission. It was like, man, good thing we were on a mission. It's like, oh my gosh, if we were been here, that was it. We'd be goners. So those are the things that you worry about. And all I think about after a while, there's also, you kind of grow a little morbid, or you have like a dark sense of humor in the Army. Oh shoot, here comes the missiles, and we got to run to a bunker, and we're all in there smoking and joking. Oh crap, here comes, having a fun time. Most people would think you're crazy, sitting in a bunker laughing at, here comes the missiles. But, I think that's the way you kind of deal with it, at the moment, and just try to find a little bit of humor in it, or just, and then afterwards it's like, okay, all right, we made it. We get to live another day kind of deal. So, yeah, but I will tell you, I'm just very proud of all the things we were able to do. But the biggest thing I'm most proud of is, luckily we didn't lose too many folks. Unfortunately, I would tell you, during the global war on terrorism, we lost more folks. At least me personally, in the units I was involved, we lost more folks in training, because we had to train hard. Augie and I, we were telling two different stories, but it was the same outcome. LMTVs rolling over and killing our soldiers. We had a great squad leader, Staff Sergeant Gessner. Mass tack at night. Unfortunately, he was our jump master, and he got pulled out of the airplane prematurely, and we had to find him the next morning, and we did eventually find him. But he passed away, and just a lot of death you'll experience in training and in war, and unfortunately, you try to minimize the ones in training. And you kind of accept the ones that happen in combat as, that's kind of what the risks are, But I don't know if that answered the question. That's just kind of, what comes to mind. Some of the things that I just remember feeling and experiencing, and just, I will tell you, there's no substitute for realistic, hard training. But there's always a risk there, and bad things happen sometimes, whether it's, out of your hands or not,
So when I joined the Army and I went to the 82nd Airborne Division, looking back on it, I was brainwashed. I was like indoctrinated. I was in. I mean, if they said, go attack the Pope, I'd be like, we're attacking the Pope. Let's go. You know what I mean? Did you feel like being a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division is your first assignment? Do you remember feeling that pride, and did that boost you for the rest of your career? Tell me about your story about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll even start before I actually even joined the military. I just remember my recruiter just not understanding why I would want to go into the airborne infantry. He was just like, like I said, my roommate Jasper and we went down to the recruiting station. I was tagging along with him, and then we started looking at some of the jobs. And I was like, well, and ironically, I had a job. I was going to work at the Georgetown Law Clinic in Washington D.C. I was considering being an attorney at the time, and but then I started thinking about it. I was like, man, I'm going to sit in a cubicle or in school for the next few years. That sounds really boring. So finally I was like, hey man, what is something cool that I can do? And I was talking to the recruiter, great guy. And he was like, well, I mean, if you ever thought about jumping out of airplanes? I was like, hell yeah, I'll jump out of airplanes. And he's like, all right, well, you could join the 82nd. But he kept trying to get me to be like a mechanic or, something different. I was like, nah, man, I want to join the infantry. If I'm gonna join the Army, I want to do that, So so there was a sense of pride. And then, of course, then you get into the Army culture is a little funny because then even like in basic training, all the basic trainees are like fighting with each other, like, oh, I have an airborne contract, or I've got, I'm going to RIP right after this. Everyone's kind of competing with each other. And I wasn't eligible to go to Ranger Regiment. I wasn't a U.S. citizen, so I couldn't join Ranger Regiment. But second best thing I could do was join the 82nd, and I think it's only a difference of money because even later in my career when I was in the 82nd, we had a bunch of guys from regiment in our battalion to include our sergeant major. And the reality was the difference between the 82nd and Ranger Regiment is money and then also scale. Obviously the 82nd is way bigger than Ranger Regiment. But they get maybe more money and they can be more selective in who they allow in and all the training that they do. And of course, we have different missions. They support. Well, actually, I'd even take that back because even during the global war on terrorism, we were always supporting special ops guys, because they're limited in their numbers as well and what they can do too. So, but, they have a special tier that they do that they work with. And, but then eventually, got through basic training. I was very proud of just what I was able to accomplish there. People noticed, I had some leadership skills there. And I remember it was just me and another guy. We got I think we got a 5-hour pass. We scored a 300 on our PT test. We were the only two who did it in the company. And so already I was excited because I was kind of showing the leadership and then also proving to myself, hey, all right, I made a good choice. Like, I'm doing well in terms of, performing here at basic. I'm doing well physically with my PT test. Went through airborne school, no issues there. And then I was excited, showing up to the 82nd. It can be a little intimidating. I remember for some reason I was delayed and I got there like at 2 a.m. And next thing you know, it's like, hey, find a place to sleep upstairs in the reception battalion. And 2 hours later, they're waking you up. We were all taking a piss test that first morning. And then right after that, we started going to like CIF, getting all our gear and just that whole process of arriving to your unit, getting put in a 5-ton, you go down to the brigade and it's like everyone's kind of looking at you. You're the new guy. Some people are scowling at you. They're all trying to figure out where to place you or which battalion you're going to go to. So, and I was lucky. I got assigned to Alpha Company of 3505, and those guys. Very rude awakening because I think they were just coming back from NTC, if I remember correctly, either NTC or JRTC. I can't remember where, but I got to CQ there, and they were just like, "Hey, nobody's here yet. They're going to come in later tonight. Put all your gear. Here's your room and whatever." And about 2 hours later, it's like 1 a.m. Boom! My door just kicks open, and everybody's like, "Get up right now! Are you the new guy?" And it was just a bunch of got angry paratroopers who had just spent the last couple of weeks at NTC, and I'm sitting there sleeping. So you can imagine how that first couple of hours went for me, as the new cherry. But it was great. I really enjoyed my time in 3505, and we got asked to do a lot of missions, either leading the battalion or leading the division as a battalion. So it was really good. And we had some, we went through a lot in terms of, after 9/11, I can't, I remember the big difference between pre 9/11 82nd and post 9/11. It was just like, maybe if you got, a couple thousand rounds before 9/11, next thing you know, we're here for like 2 or 3 days at the range because we got tens of thousands of rounds now, and we were training day and night. It was, I remember one time a 24-hour period where we didn't sleep. We just shot like for 24 hours straight. It was just rotating in different, we did, our dry fires and then our blank fires and then went with the live. And I remember seeing the sun come up and then seeing it come up again the next day when our iteration was done during the platoon live fire. So, lots of intensive training, lots of great people. And that sense of pride that you get when you train really hard and you get through it and you see yourself getting better as a team and as a platoon, and just knowing that, hey, you're growing in confidence with what you're doing. And that's where I think a lot of that kind of angst comes in, where you're just like, all right, if anybody's dumb enough to step up to the United States, well, we're ready for you. We're coming for you, kind of deal. And that being said, I'd be remiss if, we got guys deploying right now to the Middle East, and my thoughts are with those guys because, I remember that feeling. I remember deployments similar to that, and I just my thoughts and my prayers are with those guys because, they're ready, and I just hope that, I obviously I wish them all success, but they're ready. They've been trained. This is what those guys train for, and this is what we live for. And I know that may sound weird to someone who's never been in an elite unit like that, but this is payday. This is what we're all waiting for. And unfortunately, barring any politics or anything like that, unfortunately, young men and women will always be called to defend our country or to defend our interests, and and that's what I think most people need to focus on, when it comes to those young men and women out there, because regardless of who's in office, regardless what the situation is, we're going to answer the call when someone picks up that phone and says, hey, we need y'all to deploy. And these guys do it great, and they train well, and they're ready.
Tell me about your Army training. Did you go to Jump Master School? Obviously, you went to Ranger School.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, one thing, I never said no to any training opportunity. Let's see. I was an E4 when I went to Ranger School, graduated, and then I linked up with my unit in Afghanistan, actually. And I remember Colonel Schweitzer. He wrote us a letter while we were all in Ranger School. He's like, hey, don't even think about quitting, because if you don't pass Ranger School, your ass is staying at Fort Bragg. We're not bringing you forward to Afghanistan. So it was like, oh, shit. So, I went straight through. I was like, I'm trying to link up with my guys, So, but no, and shortly after that, I think I got back from Afghanistan, and then I went to a Jump Master School after that. And then even after Afghanistan, we came back, and now with the changes that were occurring, we had this huge, massive formation after we got back from a couple months after we got back from Iraq. This would have been, probably 2004, 2005 period. And, we thought we were just getting ready to get notified, hey, we're getting ready to deploy again. So, everybody was all excited and stuff. And then all of a sudden we get told, hey, our battalion is going to change from, being an infantry battalion to now a RISTA battalion. The doctrine was going to change a little bit. So each, I believe the construct was one battalion in every brigade that was an infantry battalion got divided up into these RISTA battalions. And that was a mix of cavalry. And then you had the Charlie Troop, which was all, infantry guys. And then Alpha and Bravo and Delta were the Cav guys. But because of that, I got to go to the Reconnaissance Leaders Surveillance course. That was a tough course, very academic in terms of, vehicle identification. I mean, you're looking at pictures through nods to identify, some T-72 Russian tank, and I always considered myself pretty good academically, but man, I even had to study hard, and I think I barely made the cut on that vehicle identification. It was tough, but it was worthwhile. The one thing I'll tell you about the Arslick, it looks cool. You're doing fries and spies. For those who don't know what that is, you're fast roping in and then special extractions. So, you're hanging out, out from the bottom of a helicopter, and, your team's just dangling out there. It's cool until it's November in Fort Benning, Georgia, and you're going about, 70 knots. And you're like, when can this ride be over? But same thing with being in the hide site. You'd walk all night, and you'd have maybe a couple hours to dig a hide site that was deep enough for you and your team and all your rucksack and equipment. But you learned a lot. We were able to just use wire, communicate all the way out to Germany, just using a wire and just knowing the atmospheric conditions and azimuth and stuff. So that was pretty neat, sending pictures of what we were finding in one part of the world and sending it to another part as a situation report. But they don't. But once again, it looks cool in the movies. But man, when your buddy tells you, "Hey, I gotta take a poopy, and I need you to hold that MRE bag for me," those are the realities you never see in the movies. And you're like, "Dude, put that thing away. Put it in your ruck."
You're right. The realities of some of that, make good friends, good buddies. Tell me about some of the buddies and friends and mentors and teammates you've had.
Oh yeah. Man. Well, first of all, you obviously know Nate. Nate Aganaga, man, great guy. We were in Iraq. He was always a great leader. Actually would listen to you. Kept everyone motivated and just going. And he was a very honest person too. When Nate went through his divorce, I remember that day. We just had a very big heart-to-heart conversation that made him even more human to me. It was just like, "Hey, here's what's going on, Berto, man. I can't believe this is happening," kind of deal. And it always endeared me to him because he always treated us well. We had some platoon sergeants out there that thought, it was their job to scuff up your boots. You just finish polishing your boots. Like, what the heck is this? They were looking for any reason to kind of mess with you. And that wasn't Nate's character. He was always like, "Hey, we're going to train hard, but we're going to be close and we're going to have a great time." Some other great folks I ran into, the two company commanders at RTB, they changed my life. It was Captain Ahern and Captain Messerschmitt. And actually, I think they were both majors by that time. But they were both NCOs out of Ranger Regiment. And then they went to OCS. And actually, they were the best Ranger competition winners when they were first or second lieutenants straight out of OCS. So, quality guys, high caliber. They motivated me. They gave me the drive to, go out there and serve and do well, and to seek new opportunities. And then I'd say one of the most unique people that I ever met, Colonel Drew Ferguson. He was a signal. He retired as an 06, but he was one of those just thinking out. He was think outside the box kind of guy. He wasn't afraid to challenge things. And this seems like a stupid and mute example, but this is just the one example that I always tell people. It's like, he hated how things always got added to the timeline. So if we had to be somewhere at 6, why are soldiers out here at 5 a.m? Because by the time, the brigade commander says, "Hey, we'll start a formation or the run at 6, everyone added their 15-minute pad in time. So I just remember one time he said, "Hey, guess what? Let's do something crazy. Tell everybody to be there 5 minutes beforehand." And people were losing their minds. They're like, "No, sir, we got to take accountability. How are we going to do all this?" All right. Guess what? It worked out. Everybody got there on time. Everybody was an adult. And and that's just one of the ways that I would say he kind of changed our organization. Just thinking outside the box became acceptable. Hey, why are we doing things? He questioned things. He asked how long. Why are we doing it this way? Oh, it's because we always did it that way. Okay, well, guess what? I'm giving you the freedom to do it differently. And that was very empowering. He gave us a lot of leeway to kind of just empower us and allow us to make decisions at a company level. I served under him. He was my battalion commander when I was a company commander. And then I would say some of the key folks, Colonel Justin DeArmond. He was my first commander in Korea in contracting. Similar kind of person. He, smart guy. He's a military academy graduate. Just very empowering. His leadership was one of being a servant leader. And then my last battalion commander, Colonel Amy Sow, wonderful person. She actually played basketball for the military academy for West Point, and just an incredible person, great heart. She empowered us as well. And I keep talking about folks that empower you, but I'll tell you, there's times where I think if you haven't been in the military, or maybe if you were in the military too long ago, you may feel like, hey, everything's kind of coming from the top. But, the Army changed its doctrine, changed its leadership. It became more of a mission command, hey, there isn't just a single head leading this operation. This thing can go whether the top person's in charge or not, and that was great because it helped me out in various situations. I know I told some stories about Afghanistan and Iraq, but one of the key developmental things that helped me was, I was in Kurdistan for 9 months running the contracting office up there. And this is during, Operation Inherent Resolve. So we're working with NATO forces. We're working with special operation guys. And we were even working with guys that were in Syria, supporting them. Unfortunately, at the time, the way we were just kind of task organized, I was the closest contracting office to the folks that supported the operations there. But unfortunately, they weren't under my responsibility. But what I learned was, hey, it doesn't matter who's responsible for what. I'll give you advice, but just know you may have to get the final word from somebody else. But the biggest thing we did there was a lot of host nation negotiations with the Kurds. I mean, you can imagine it, hot, smoky rooms, lots of cigarettes going around, and we're over here trying to negotiate the ability for, our forces to either maneuver in the area or even contracting companies. We had a situation where within the first 30 days that we got there, a new kind of regime took over, and the Asaish they're kind of a mix of like the Homeland Security / CIA for these guys in Kurdistan. But they basically said, hey, only these 10 companies can now work on Erbil Air Base. And if you're familiar with the area, Erbil Air Base is right next to the international airport there in northern Iraq. And that made a huge impact. We go from 300 companies that come on our base to just 10. And overnight, that just had catastrophic results to everybody who required the contract and support out there. So we had to go in there and do a lot of negotiation. I would say what proved evident, or what became very clear to me, was folks that had been in Iraq maybe 5, 10, 15 years previously, they thought we were still operating under the same conditions. There was a period in OIF where we could do whatever we want. It was the snatch and grab days. You grab somebody, throw a sandbag over them, and you took them back to the fob, and you maybe hand them over to S2 guys and then interrogate them. Well, then eventually, over periods, couple rotations, obviously the Iraqi government got its sovereignty back, and then now you had to do things in a legal process. Well, a lot of the folks that high level folks were coming up to Kurdistan saying like, "Hey, what gives? Why are these guys telling us how to operate?" And I had to remind them, don't ever forget you're a guest in Iraq now, and more importantly, you're a guest in Kurdistan, which is separate from the central Iraqi government. They have their own sovereign government up here that's separate. So lots of a big learning curve for a lot of logistical leaders and just combat leaders, and but one thing I am proud of is our team was able to kind of help them navigate that. And at one point, we became the sort of the lead negotiators with some of the multinational force guys that were there. But just very proud of all the people I was able to meet, and that's just a small glimpse into some of the folks that impacted our lives. But I will tell you, if you're out there and you're watching this and you serve with me and I missed your name, I apologize. But there's so many great people, and full disclosure, my memory is not what it used to be. So if we served a long time ago, it's not that I forgot about you. It's just maybe I've forgotten some good stories about you.
Yeah, right. So do me a favor, segue into bragging on your family. Tell me about the wonderfulness of those that you love and that love you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, in terms of my family, I'll start with my beautiful wife, Stephanie. I met my wife right after my deployment from Iraq in 2004. Like I mentioned, she was home and she was visiting my soon-to-be brother-in-law. Actually, my brother-in-law was my squad leader when we had deployed from Bragg to Iraq. And at that time, they said, "Hey, we're going to bust down all the barracks. They're all going to get remodeled." So, we were all told to get all our gear out of there. So I threw all my gear in my soon-to-be brother-in-law's garage. And, I met my wife in the summer of or spring of 2004. And, we just hit it off immediately. Wonderful, smart woman. And by December of that year, we were married. And then by September of the next year, we had our first child, Chase, who's now 20. And he's a sophomore at Colorado State University right now up in Fort Collins. But, those were definitive years in our marriage and our lives. Like I said, we were going through intensive training cycles during the global war on terrorism. So, my wife was just, she actually went to Fayetteville State University, transferred, and then we actually spent a pretty good amount of time there. I think I spent almost 6 years in the 82nd, almost to a T. And, those years were pretty formative. We have lots of bonds with a lot of families that we met there, a lot of soldiers. That's where I met Ihar. That's where I met Augie. Some key leaders out there in the Army that some folks might know, Command Sergeant Major Reep, Colonel Schweitzer, who ended up being a general officer. All these folks that I just recall that supported us while we were a young family. And I always performed and was able to kind of use my influence outside of my rank and outside of just the level that I was in charge of. So I had some pretty good memories of just meeting great people despite what their rank may be, and just forming good bonds with them. But I'll tell you, it's all nostalgic. Anytime I get a chance to even just drive through Fayetteville, I always do that because I like driving through Hope Mills, showing like my kids like, hey, that was mom and dad's first apartment, and then they had the lake area. Unfortunately, they've had it several iterations where I think the dam broke right there by Hope Mills, and but we also have friends that weren't even in the military at all. They just grew up in that area and became good friends of ours. They were telling us stories how they remember when they got that first McDonald's at Hope Mills and everyone was excited. Now that place is blown up. I mean, they got everything you would need there, movie theaters, everything. It's a pretty big, drastic change. and then it's just nostalgic, just driving on Ardennes, now with all the new construction and the new barracks and the whole company operations concept, because that's one thing a lot of folks may not know that, are in the 82nd now. Back then, it was almost like you never got away from work because the first level of the barracks was your company headquarters, and then you lived right above it in the barracks. So, but now that's a different concept. Now, folks have their company, their company operations facility, and then they also have their the barracks, which may not even be near where you work anymore. But yeah, no, I just remember just being really proud, walking around, you had your red beret, you're walking around in your uniform. Once again, there's always the little, I call it the dog butt sniffing contest, checking out everyone's badges, scare me badges. And, every now and then you run into the guys with the long tabs and you're like, oh man, it's inspirational for some folks. It's like, hey, I want to be one of them one day. And then you do see guys go out and do that that you served with and you're proud of them doing that. It's just, it's a unique environment where, if you're able to perform and do well, you're rewarded, and people will see that. Eventually, some of the key family members that supported us while we were there, like I said, my brother-in-law, Sam Snow, he was there with his family. And that was good for my wife because, she always had our sister-in-law to kind of, Sam and I would be in the field usually at the same time, and they had each other to support. And I think that's always key, whether or not you're actually blood family or not, we've become great friends with so many different Army families, and you depend on each other. And, what you realize is sometimes you'll get closer to your Army family than your actual family, because you're always deployed or you're always at some other austere location or a base that you may or may not be able to see your family as often. But, Army families, you support each other. And then even when we got assigned to other units and other organizations, you get an opportunity sometimes to work with other services, and that's always a blast. You kind of at Fort Gordon, I remember just kind of sticking it to all the Navy guys, beat Navy or go Army, beat Navy signs all over the place on their lawns, and they get us back too by, so it was a good time, but definitely, I would say your family and then the other Army families you encounter, you learn to depend on them, and you kind of go through, you go through the ups and downs together. When some of the accidents that I discussed about where soldiers were hurt during our interview last week, we wouldn't have gotten through that without families coming together and just supporting each other.
Amen to that. Amen to that. You talked about your mother being a faithful woman and a fighter, and I know that there's no such things as atheists in the foxholes. Describe your spirituality to me. What keeps you going on those long road marches or those, ranger movements or whatever you got going on?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No atheists in the foxhole, right? I just so I think I'm more of a spiritual person than a religious person, and that's later in life that I went from that because I'll kind of give you a quick history. When I was first born, everyone in my family was a Catholic, and that's the majority of Salvadorans. You're Catholic, but I was just telling my wife even this morning, when I was first born, I ended up contracting meningitis, and all the doctors thought I was going to die. So they even called in the local priest. He's over there giving me my last rites, all this stuff. This is when I'm like, I don't know, maybe a couple months old. And it's kind of funny how our family transitioned from being, Roman Catholic to Protestant because the Catholic priest left, and then some preacher walks by. He's evangelical Pentecostal kind of guy, and he walks by and sees everyone in the room crying, and he's like, "Hey, family, what's going on?" "Oh, little Roberto's gonna die. The priest just left and gave him his last rites." And he's like, no, let's all get together. We're gonna pray, and I don't know what prayer they did. I don't know if somebody pulled out a snake or started speaking in tongues or whatever. But the bottom line is, I lived, and all of a sudden, the majority of my family converted from being Roman Catholic to Pentecostal.
Hey, so, speaking in tongues, baby.
So that's the short Lainez religious history story there for our family, and to this day, I think we only have one or two aunts that might still be Roman Catholic, but everybody else converted. But and then I grew up in that environment, going to the Nazarene Church here in Washington D.C. on 16th Street, and then eventually, I even had my own like kind of religious journey even as a kid, and I think there's a lot to be said about faith and goals, and just kind of having your mind in the right mindset, and kind of trusting in God, because I will tell you some of the good things that happened early in my life, like going to that boarding school, that happened to me during a period where I was very close to God, and I got even to an extreme where I was the kid handing out like fire and brimstone pamphlets on M Street in Georgetown on a Friday and Saturday night, so definitely went through the whole spectrum of being in a church and out there witnessing. But eventually, life happens. You start getting away from the church a little bit, and then for me, there were some things that happened in my life where I started just questioning faith and questioning things. And I will tell you, I don't consider myself an atheist. I just consider other possibilities, and that's where the faith comes in, I guess. And where I'm at is more like kind of a scientific kind of thing. It's like, hey, I'm not saying God doesn't exist, but I'll believe it when I see the proof. Otherwise, you can tell me something else exists, and I'll tell you the same thing. Okay, show me the proof. And that is by no means to bring down anyone else's belief or faith, because you know what, whatever it takes to get through, it's kind of like how you framed the question. What's it take for you to get through tough situations? And for some people, it will be God, and for other people, it's just going to be like, hey, it's going to be my my no quit attitude, or some other kind of principle that you may have in your mind or in your body that you just kind of value, and that's what keeps you going. But for anyone out there who does believe in God and has faith, I will tell you that's a wonderful thing, because there's great things that can come out of that. And if that's what it takes to get you through a tough day, or to allow you to show someone charity or just compassion and to do great works out there, then God bless you, man. Go out there and keep driving on, because there are great things that happen through faith. I'll tell you, one of the unique things that I wasn't exposed to until I joined the military were Mormons. And let me tell you, we have some great Mormon friends. Mormonism, a lot of people don't realize this, but that is like literally the American-born religion. It started here, and we see young. They call them elders, young elders, knocking on doors, riding bikes, just, kind of doing their thing throughout the world, actually, because I saw Mormons in El Salvador when I was there, and I shook their hands and said, hey, man, thank you for what you do, and you guys are doing great things. But just incredible people, incredible values. They make sure to spend time with their families. They have specific dates where it's just like, hey, we're doing some family event, and then also just the faith and the witnessing that they do. And not to just point out Mormonism, but other religions do the same thing, or other sects of Christianity. It's just, you got to pick your flavor, you got to pick your belief systems, you got to, whatever it may be. And for those who don't have a religious background or a religious system, whatever it is that you have found to keep you principled and to, be an ethical kind of person. And because you don't need religion to be a moral person, all the great philosophers prove that, but you need to believe in something, you know.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So tell me about how your military career ended, and now what are you doing? You say you're still working here in the Colorado City area. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So in 2024, I retired out of Fort Carson. I was serving in the 918th Contracting Battalion there. So out of there, we're responsible for all the products, services, and goods in support of 65,000 people on Fort Carson. And we, like I said, it was a great situation that I went into contracting because as I was looking for a job, there were plenty of opportunities. This is also this is also before some of the changes that happened recently in the administration, where remote opportunities were no longer available, and we lost a good amount of government jobs. But it was a very fertile environment for me to retire and come right back in. Hey, Will, I don't know if you see this. I see something that says there's a recording error. I don't know if we have to take a pause here or not.
I don't have any issues right here that I see. Let's
Okay.
keep rolling.
All right. Okay, no problem. I'll keep going. So bottom line, I retired out of Fort Carson. I was able to land a great job with a company called Acquisition Experts. They do contract support for the DoD and various other federal agencies, actually. I basically went from doing what I was doing, on Friday afternoon, and then Monday morning, I'm doing the exact same thing, except, from the luxury of being able to work remotely from home. As you can see, this is my office here in the basement. My wife gives me a hard time because I complain that she gets the nice office upstairs and she gets a view of Pikes Peak. Me, I just get to look at all my old awards. But, it's a wonderful opportunity that I have here because, I get to support the Marine Corps. And, that's another thing I'll tell you, as you deploy and as you get into more senior positions, and, there isn't a fight we go into that's not joint. And, everywhere I've gone, at least in the contracting world, when I deployed, it was always an Air Force person with us or a Marine Corps folk with us. And it was very, very fulfilling. It's great to bring the team along. It's great to just have everybody come along. Of course, if it's your birthday and you're a Marine, I'm going to give you some crayons for so you can snack on later. Or if you're an Air Force person, we'll try to find some air conditioning for you somewhere. But those are the things that that build camaraderie, and we're just kind of messing with each other. But we're the only ones who can mess with each other. But right now I currently support the Marine Corps Installation Command. There it's different. It's more high level. We support the headquarters out of the Pentagon, and it's more service contracts. Not to get into the weeds of things, but one of the unique things that'll happen, and that I do miss from not being from being in the military, is when you become a contractor, a lot of guys don't think about this, but there's like inherently governmental roles that you can no longer do. For example, I can't obligate money. I can't make policy decisions. I can't lead troops. I can't, these are things that are solely governmental functions, whether you're military or Department of Defense civilian. So that was kind of a little, I don't want to say a letdown, but because I already knew that was the case, but it was more just like, hey, the ways of operating kind of, hey, let's get after it. Let's solve this. Now it's a little more flash to bang, since I can't make decisions. I don't make policy. But that's something, if you're out there and you're considering becoming a defense contractor, don't let that shock you. Just be prepared. You're not going to have the same authorities or even responsibilities that you used to have. That can also be liberating too, because someone else is making those decisions. You're just there kind of being the rower, you're just in the canoe rowing with the team and trying to get us to the same goal.
Amen. Amen. What are your hobbies now? Or maybe are you a golfer? Or do you like cigars? Do you drink scotch? What kind of things do you like to do?
Yeah, so I do like cigars. I have a good friend. My last deployment when we were in Kurdistan, he introduced me to cigars, but it was starting to impact my running, so I had to stop that for a long time now. I enjoy history. I'm a history major. My favorite, I got my focus was on American history, but my favorite part is the Civil War. Predominantly because I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, and in Virginia, I mean, there's the the capital of the Confederacy was down in Richmond. Then you have the Union capital in D.C., and it's like I've traversed these battlefields as a kid, just driving around Virginia and Maryland and Pennsylvania. I also love travel. I always, my wife will tell me I'm a map nerd, and maybe I got that from the military, but I just like getting on Google Maps, saying, "Hey, I've never been here. Let's see what's there." And it's like, "All right, kids, jump in the car. We're gonna go drive." And they're like, "Now, poor kid." I think I traumatized the twins, the 8-year-olds. They're like, "We're not going to Florida again, are we?" I took them on a 2-day or like a 2.5-day drive down to Florida, and they did not like that.
They were hostages.
Yeah, they kept asking me, "When are we getting there?" Like every hour. Poor kids. But yeah, and then just cultural exchange. I love food. We spent 2.5 years in South Korea, and man, that was incredible. Unfortunately, it was during COVID, so like the first year we were there, luckily my mother and father-in-law were able to come out there and visit us, and they had a blast. We traveled all over Korea, and that first year we went everywhere. I mean, we went all the way up to the mountains up north. I got a unique opportunity to actually go to the joint security area and step into North Korea with the blue building there that separates North and South Korea. So that was pretty neat. And but I'll tell you, the people there were incredible. The internet is fast and cheap. I mean, it's the best internet everywhere you go. There's Wi-Fi connections. The rail system is incredible. And it made you kind of, even their technology sometimes, like if you're on a commuter train in the city, they have programmed their trains to frost the windows when you go by people's houses. And then when you're past like a residential area, it unfrosts and you can see, the scenery again. It was just neat. Like, it was just like, wow, that's pretty impressive. Somebody gave that a lot of thought, and, and you see the realm of possibilities that could happen even here in the United States. I know here we're discussing creating a rail system, I believe from Pueblo all the way up to Fort Collins. I think that'd be great. Get some cars off the road, go up to a Denver Broncos game, not have to worry about parking or anything like that. It'd be wonderful, But yeah, I just kind of love learning about the world. My biggest new thing, I kept buying books, and they just kept stacking up. I never had time to read them, so now I listen to books. Just while I'm typing away or doing some work, I love listening to books. And then there's some books that honestly, if they're really really impactful, I'll go out and buy it and kind of give it to friends as a gift. I have a bad habit. Somebody mentioned it to me. I like to give people homework. Like, hey, I found a great book you'll like. Read it and tell me about it. So, I don't know if my friends try to avoid me now when they see me walking around with a book towards them.
They running away. They were like, "Oh heck no, Berto's coming, man! Berto's coming." So close us out with a message to those that might come behind you. Tell me, to give something to your, thought about maybe your grandkids that might come, or some kind of message to those that might see this one day, some kind of a timeless thing. Do Do you have a message that you could say, something that drives you, or something like that as we begin to close out?
Sure. Yeah, for posterity's sake, I will tell you to my future grandkids and great grandkids, and you know, I hope our family continues to be blessed and continues to thrive, and I hope the United States continues to be blessed, because I want you to never forget where we came from. Yes, we're Salvadoran, you know, but you got to always remember that the strength of the United States was, people coming from all over the world and contributing, and then eventually becoming Americans. The one thing I would like to tell my future generations of kids is, don't forget where you come from, one, and then don't forget your language. I will tell you, for a while, I kind of had a high that I spoke Spanish. Now now if you don't speak Spanish, it's an opportunity cost for you financially and in all other ways. I would recommend, and I mentioned that, I love the Civil War. We have these Irish brigades, we had the German brigades, they weren't speaking English on the battlefield, So I will tell you, everyone just always hold on to your culture. It doesn't matter where you come from. My wife, she's Irish, English, German, and my kids are all those, plus now Salvadoran. So take pride. I recently did a 23andMe DNA test, and I was astounded by my genetic background. I mean, it's Mediterranean. I'm Jewish. I'm things I never thought I ever was. I just thought I was, hey, I'm just a mix of Spanish and Mesoamerican indigenous groups. I'm not. It goes way further back, and I think if people just know the genetic background, they're more willing and they're more willing to open their eyes and their hearts to all types of people. And that's what I will tell you. Our nation's going to do great. We're going to continue to be a leader in the world, but it takes people from all over the world to become American. And also it takes people who are here to not forget where they come from and not forget all the sacrifices that's been made for us to thrive. So, Will, I thank you for this opportunity, and I think it's a wonderful project you have going on, and I'm excited for you and the opportunities you're giving everyone.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, thank you for being on, and it was such a pleasure. And, there's several folks that are on here, have been on here watching and commenting, and thank you for everything. And I salute you. Thank you for your service. And one of the things that we do is as kind of a salute and a signing out. So one of the things we've done is like call your unit to attention, render a hand salute, and then like state your name, rank, whatever, and then signing out kind of thing. Can you do that for me?
Sure.
All right.
All right. I have to bring the old NCO out in me.
Yeah, right?
All right. Group attention. Present arms. Order arms. Hey, this is Major Retired Lainez, wishing you all a great day. And I hope you find some value in this interview. And to all the folks in the 82nd out there in the signal world, and then also contracting world that I have the tremendous pleasure of serving with. I love you. I thank you for your service, and we're always thinking about you.
Oh, my salute to you, Roberto Lainez. Thank you, man. I really enjoyed it. That was a blast.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Oh, man.
Marshall in the middle.